What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Comic Breakdown. In this video, we are jumping into Punisher issue number 7. This will be Punisher versus Daredevil. The long-awaited confrontation has finally arrived, with Frank Castle being the beast of the hand. Daredevil and Elektra, they have reformed the Fist. This will be the beginning of the war. But what I love more about this comic is it is hugely focusing on combat PTSD. You know, I've talked a handful of times about my time being an infantryman, being in the military, going overseas, and Jason Aaron has done such an amazing job of really highlighting what it is to come home, what it is to live a life after you have been in combat, after you have seen the other side of the coin, the ugly face of humanity that is war. Hands down, this is my favorite issue so far, and I'm going to repeat this because I have been saying it over and over and over again. If you are not reading The Punisher because of his symbol change, you are missing out on one of the best Punisher lines to come out in years. So if you are not reading this, get your butt off the couch, go buy the comic because it is freaking amazing. Now, make sure you guys have subscribed to the channel, make sure you like this video, and with that being said, let's dive into this breakdown. Alright gang, so as we dive into this issue, we're going to be jumping around time a little bit. We're going to be taking place right after Frank Castle returns home from war, and we're also going to be focusing on present day. Now, as we jump into the past when we first open up this comic, we are getting narration from Maria, and she has been having a very reoccurring dream, almost a nightmare. Opening up the door, what she sees is the devil, because with Frank Castle returning home, and every time she looks at him, she sees nothing but the devil himself. She is worried about the sins that Frank Castle has committed, the things that he has done in the name of his country. She is concerned about his salvation and his soul, telling all of this to the Catholic priest. She says to have him come in, bring in Frank Castle, have him come to confession, lay his sins out so that he can have a few Hail Marys and we can save his soul. She had prayed every single night that Frank Castle would be safe, that he would be strong, and now that he has come home, it is clear that he is stronger than ever. But at this point, Maria doesn't believe that God has anything to do with that. This is what takes us to the Citadel of the Hand, the confrontation we have all been waiting for. Daredevil has scaled the walls and he is here questioning the Punisher, trying to figure out what the heck he is doing. And Daredevil tries to let him know that you are being used. You may think that you are using the hand, but you are only being used for ruin and slaughter. Obviously, Frank Castle letting Daredevil know that he doesn't need his permission, just like every time before they have ever had any kind of conflict. Today is no different, but he does give Daredevil the opportunity to leave. But Daredevil has been sneaking around this citadel for quite a while. He saw the ninjas bring him home. He saw Frank Castle on the verge of death. He knows the Archpriestess has been using her magic to bring him back. He has also seen his dead wife up in that building, asking what Maria would think about everything that is going on. Daredevil turns his back to the Punisher. He goes to tell Maria everything that is happening. That is where the Punisher stops him, grabs hold of him, and throws him across the field. As the flames start to come out of Frank Castle's eyes, he draws his sword out, letting Daredevil know that he is having a choice, that he can turn around, he can walk away all right now. But we know Daredevil, and there is no way that he is turning away from this. That is where the fight breaks out, with the devil of Hell's Kitchen going in full force, ready to lay down some hate. We cut back over to the past. Maria remembers asking Frank Castle when he returned home, was the war really as bad as the TV makes it out to be? But Frank Castle said nothing. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, almost as if he is lost in thought, what some would call the 1,000-yard stare. And then he rolls over and he pretends to be asleep, avoiding talking about the war even in the slightest bit. But she did understand the longing look in his eyes, the longing for a world that made sense to him, for a world that he could love even in all its turmoil. And as Maria would watch him with their children, she always kept an eye on him. Whenever whenever he was around them, the children were almost terrified of him. The truth being, Frank Castle, he was more terrified of his own children. He was terrified of the family life, the monotony, no longer being in conflict, no longer at a war. It took about a month before he started setting up a tent in the backyard. This is where he would sleep most of his nights, holding that gun to his chest. He is always prepared, always ready for something to pop off. And every few weeks, there would be a new veteran at the door, almost as if they were holy disciples making their sacred pilgrimage. They would bring gifts, envelopes of cash, all which Frank Castle would refuse. They would tell Maria with tears in their eyes that they would be dead if not for Frank Castle, that he was their savior, he was their hero, that in the face of certain death, he stood triumphant. But Frank Castle didn't like her hearing these stories, acting as if it was almost an old fling, something that he doesn't want to talk about and he wants to erase from his memory. But Maria knew all the way back then that war was his one true love. And now returning home, he is mourning the loss of that love while he sleeps alone away from his wife, and the children grow up with a stranger inside their house. And while Maria was away, needing a hysterectomy, she was in the hospital for a couple of days just to recover, which means Frank Castle had to be left alone with the children. Maria would be lying to herself if she wasn't concerned. When she came home, what she found was nobody in the home, but it was an absolute disaster. Food, toys, garbage, all over the place. And when she saw that the children's bed were empty, she had panicked. In this moment, she truly realized how scared and afraid she had become of the man she married, believing that she never really knew him at all. Going into his tent in the backyard, opening up, this is where she finds Frank and the children. This is the moment she saw what all the other veterans had seen. She saw Lieutenant Frank Castle, United States Marine Corps, the man who always kept his people safe. She realizes that she may not know who Frank Castle is, but that is because Frank Castle doesn't know who he is, not outside of war. But she does believe that given time, with the grace of God and having faith, that he may figure that out. With Frank Castle coming in that night, grabbing hold of Maria and holding her close. She could feel him trembling, trying to tell her a story about a boy on a rooftop when something horrible had happened. He tried, but he couldn't find the words. And so they just held each other until the sun came up. This is when she comes to the realization that Frank Castle didn't go overseas looking for a war. He had gone because he was running away from one. Throwing us back into present day, the battle between Frank Castle and Daredevil. And while Frank Castle, he has gotten relatively good with a sword, in comparison to Daredevil, he is sloppy, he is inconsistent, and he is no good whatsoever against the devil of Hell's Kitchen. With Daredevil trying to let him know that your eyes, right now, they are on fire. These are gifts of the beasts. He thought these to just be myth. At this point, this has gone way past playing a part in swinging a sword, that he has been truly infected by the power of the beast. Being able to outmaneuver the Punisher, he gets Frank Castle down on the ground with a knee on his neck, and he tries to let him know that he has been down this road before. The beast's evil once had possessed him. It had corrupted him, the same way it is doing to Frank Castle right now. But the Daredevil has a cure for this. After his possession, he had Dr. Strange teach him a spell, just in case the hand ever tried it again. This is an exorcism spell. Putting the cross onto Frank Castle's forehead, he begins to chant the spell. He begins trying to siphon the evil that has gone inside of Frank Castle. As the rage builds up inside the Punisher, we are taken back to Maria. After that night, things had been much different for her family. The kids would go out to Frank Castle's tent. There would be times that you even hear Frank laughing. He was starting to get better. He was trying to throw off those chains that binded him so much. She was even able to get him to agree that he could go to confession, that maybe, just maybe, this could help him. And he was in there for quite some time. That, of course, is until the priest comes running out, never speaking to Maria again. A week after that, she was told that her job at the church had been eliminated. After that, Frank started sleeping in his tent alone again. You see, what happened is that the priest was unable to deal with the carnage, the horror that Frank Castle had done. It made that man of God very much understand what the devil is. But this also makes Frank Castle go back into his shell, believing that maybe he can confront these things, that he could be able to talk to somebody about it. But the first time that he does, he is immediately rejected. He is seen as a monster. His wife pays a toll for what he has done. At this point, Frank Castle knows that he is forsaken. As we jump back over to Daredevil's exorcism, believing maybe this worked. Maybe I was able to cleanse Frank Castle. But that is when the flames come up. Being caught off guard, we see Frank Castle come up and go for the Daredevil. Grabbing Daredevil by the neck, he tells him to look at him, to look Frank Castle in the eyes and tell me, do you see a man who is possessed? Daredevil, recognizing that there is no possession here. He is not a puppet. He is not a lost soul in need of salvation. The Punisher is what he has always been. Daredevil telling him that now I see. It's not the beast that I should be worried about. It is you. With Frank Castle looking down, they find themselves floating about 15 feet off the ground. Letting Daredevil go, he is able to make his escape before all the ninja come for him. And Frank Castle is finally starting to realize what he is becoming. Now, as we jump back over to Maria, she is trying to let Frank Castle know that there are other churches. But after that encounter, he is never going back in a church. He also understands that the world is not safe. And so he gives a gun to Maria. He is going to teach her how to use it to protect them from the monsters that are out in the world. In present day, we have Frank Castle and Maria, with Maria dreaming the same dream over and over and over again, dreaming that there is a devil at the door, but she knows that she is safe as long as Frank Castle stands by her side. But she also comes to the realization that the children are never coming back, that the Archpriestess magic, it is just not good enough, not strong enough to resurrect the children. But she is beginning to remember more and more every single day. She does ask the question, why do they call you the Punisher? Maria is finally starting to get some more senses about her. She is starting to get more of her memory back. This is making her really start to question everything that is going on. On the outside of the forest that houses the Citadel of the Hand, we have the Apostles of War. The god of war Ares, his army stands at the gates, unable to break through the forest. Every man that they have sent in has not returned. But our god of war is angry. The Punisher made a god bleed. This means Ares is angry. When you make a god angry, you get an Armageddon. Having ninjas of the hand tied up, they are using them as guides to get through the forest. With Ares, his army of men and tanks, they make their march on the Citadel. And that will be the end of this issue. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. You know, like I said, this is hands down my favorite issue of the Punisher in this series so far, because they really have focused on Frank Castle's PTSD. But it's so much more than that, because his war is started so much earlier in life. For me personally, this is something I can connect with. You know, I grew up in a very bad household. My stepmother was an alcoholic. She was physically and mentally abusive. Her son had sexually abused me, my brother, and my sister. So for me growing up, that household was a war zone of its own, of pain, of lies, of manipulation. So when she says that Frank Castle went overseas, not to find war, but to run away from his war, it is something that truly resonates with me. And there's something about being in a war zone, the simplicity of life. You wake up every morning, you eat your food, you pick up your rifle, and you do what needs to be done. You protect the man to your left and right. Life is that simple. There are no bills, no relationships, no struggling outside of what war is. But returning home, many say that this is where the true battle begins. Because once you have that camaraderie taken away from you, once you have that singular mission put to the side. You have to try and figure out what is left over. This reminds me of one of my most favorite quotes from the movie Jarhead. It goes as such: a man fires a rifle for many years, and he goes to war. He comes home and he sees that whatever else he may do with his life, build a house, love a woman, change his son's diaper, he will always remain a jarhead. And all the jarheads killing and dying, they will always be me. We are still in the desert. So let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your theories. If you would like to get caught up on everything going on with the Punisher, be sure to check out the link in my description as well as the top of this video. It is going to get you completely caught up on everything going on with Jason Aaron's Punisher. If you would like to support the channel, you can always do so by joining the channel membership, much like Patreon, having 5 different tiers from $1 to $50, from loyalty badges to getting free comics every single month. Not only does this help out the channel tremendously, you are getting tons of perks in the process. Now, if you are unable to do that, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like this video, hit that notification bell, and with that being said, until the next breakdown.